Hello guys, we are on the ninth and the final game in the Dominating the Open File series, and this game is a Sicilian game which transposes to French advanced variation, and this game was played between Sveshnikov as white and Balashov as black in Moscow 1976. So let's see the game. e4 c5 c3 e6 d4 d5 e5. Now as it has transposed to a French advanced variation, Grandmaster Sveshnikov was recognized as an expert on this line in the 70s and 80s. Although this game shows a dark side to his contribution. Knight c6, knight f3, bishop d7. That is one possibility. Usually on moves 4 and 5, black chooses 2 out of 3 for 3 of the following moves, that is queen b6, knight c6 and bishop d7. Of course transpositions are possible, but generally each setup has various ideas. Black chose a flexible setup. He can go for queen b6 with the transfer of the kingside knight to f5, or he can go for f6 at the right time, probably after the moves knight e7 to g6 and bishop e7 and castling. Now d takes c5. If white pawn is already on c3, this move doesn't make sense. The point is that c3 was played with the idea of strengthening the center. White voluntarily destroys his pawn chain by taking on c5, thus making the move c3 a waste of time. Now bishop takes c5, now bishop d3 and knight ge7 and castles, and this is not a precise move here, and here white should not play b4 because after bishop to b6, then b5, then knight a5, and this is excellent for black. So here bishop f4 was good. After knight g6, now bishop g3 was much better. The bishop looks passive on g3, but it overprotects the e5 pawn. Now the thematic blow f6 is not as effective for black. The bishop on g3 would become very active and help establish a blockade on e5. But now white went castling, then after knight g6, now rook e1, then queen c7. Black insists on taking the e5 pawn. Now bishop takes g6. This is a huge mistake by white. It is very strange that a great expert like Sveshnikov would choose such a move. Firstly, white voluntarily gives away his most valuable piece. Secondly, black can now seize the initiative on the king's side. Furthermore, white will soon face problems with regards to finding a promising plan. Finally, black's pieces will become extraordinarily active on the king's side. Now f takes g6, and this is a key move. After this, black seizes the initiative and everything goes smoothly. Advanced players would probably choose it, and real masters would certainly play it. However, beginners would probably not even consider it. Automatically taking with the they would automatically take with the h pawn. And let's see why taking with the f pawn is good. The decision should be based on the resulting open files. Of course, the f file gives black more than the h file. After taking with the h pawn, it would be very difficult to prove that the rook is useful on h8. White can keep the strong e5 pawn, so black is unable to build pressure on the h2 pawn. Furthermore, it would be risky for black to choose to castle king side. White can potentially organize an attack with the knight on g5 and the queen on h3 or h4. Most people would argue that pawn should go towards the center. Yes, in the early stages of the game. Actually, by taking with the f pawn, black takes care of the center. The rook on the f file will attack the knight on f3, making some sacrifices possible. The knight on f3 is such an important piece, controlling the d4 outpost and protecting the key pawn on e5. After the move f takes g6, black can also go for a kingside attack, supported by his pawns. h6 and then g5. It is clear that f3 knight will soon face problems. Hence white will have problems in the center. Last but not least, taking with the f-pawn gives opportunities to the light squared bishop. It may be placed on g6 or h5. Now bishop f4 castles, bishop g3, knight e7. The knight goes to the nice f5 square. From there it can control both d5 and attack on g3 bishop. Knight bd2. And here if knight d4 is put to stop knight f5, then knight f5, then after knight takes f5, rook takes f5, black will double on the f file and will have a clear advantage. So it is better to put knight bd2, then knight f5, then knight b3, then bishop a4. Now king h1. This is another mistake in the game. Moving the queen was a must. Here instead queen e2 was better. After bishop takes b3, the b3 knight is ready to jump to d4. This bishop takes b3 was a good option. After a takes b3, there is g5. But white goes king h1, then queen b6. Now new problems for white. Both the queen and b3 knight are now paralyzed. Queen c2, rook a c8 and queen rook e2. Look at the white pieces. Only the rooks can make reasonable moves. White can only dream of putting a reasonable plan together. His position is hopeless. Black has a pleasant choice. There are many promising plans for him. Playing on the king side with h6 and g5, doubling on the f file, doubling on the c file, opening the position with d4 and so on. First of all, black chooses to improve his position on the king side. Now h6, h3, g5. Knight takes. Here on the 18th move, instead of g5, knight takes g3 check doesn't make any sense. There is no reason to trade this beautiful knight for the bishop. After bishop h2, rook c7, preparing to double on either c or f file. Now knight e1, bishop e7. Here d4 was also a good option. And now queen d1, rook c4. Now black changes plan. Instead of doubling, he prefers to control the fourth rank. Rook d2, g4. Here knight e3 looks nice, but after queen e2, the knight has to retreat. Now if at all f takes, after knight after knight e3, f takes e3, and there is rook f1 check. Now bishop to g1, queen takes e3 is coming, so the knight cannot be taken, but white can put queen e2. So before that, black goes g4. Now after hg4, knight e3 is good, and after queen e2, knight takes c4, f3, and knight takes h2, and now knight d4. Here, if at all king takes h2 was played, then rook h4 check could come, and after king g3, then there will be queen g1, and now after knight d4, there is bishop c5. Here bishop b5 was better, avoiding the fork on b3 and threatening to take the knight on d4. And if knight d3, and there is rook takes d4, c takes d4, queen takes d4, king takes h2, queen h4 check, king g1, and bishop c5 check. Would have been a beautiful final. It is quite apparent how black bishops have dominated over the white minor pieces throughout the game. But black went for bishop c5, and after king takes h2, bishop takes d4, c takes d4, rook takes d4. Now rook c1. Here queen f2 was more resistant. Queen f2. After now rook takes d2, queen takes d2. Now rook to c8. Black should be winning. The knight cannot reach the blockading d4 square. If at all b3, and then bishop e8, knight to c2, then queen c7. But black goes rook c1. After rook h4 check, king g3, bishop b5, queen g1 is also winning. Queen f2, queen d8, queen e3, d4, and rook c d1, rook h f4, queen takes f4, rook takes f4, king takes f4, and queen g5 check, and white resigned here because he is getting mated on queen e3, and it's an amazing game. It's a surprise that Sveshnikov played the opening in such a primitive manner, and his opponent punished him. I hope all of you would fully appreciate all the benefits of f takes g6 move instead of h takes g6, and this is a very instructive game. So I hope you would have enjoyed the game. I'll meet you in the next series. Thank you all.